April 10, 1912. RMS Titanic, the largest man-made moving object at that time, embarked on its maiden voyage across the North Atlantic. Just 5 days later, the world was shocked when it sank, claiming the lives of over 1,500 passengers and crew members. The demise of the Titanic has become one of the most infamous and heartbreaking events in history. However, its fate was not solely the result of a collision with an iceberg. It was the result of a rare mix of technical oversights, human mistakes, and remarkably poor fortune.
From the very day that she was designed, she was almost doomed.
A century after the sinking, with the benefit of forensic analysis of the wreck and examination of historical records, this video uncovers the chain of events that led to the demise of a ship thought to be unsinkable, resulting in the greatest maritime tragedy in modern history. RMS Titanic, the world's largest and most luxurious ship of its time, embarked on its maiden voyage, traveling from Southampton, England, to New York. Aboard were all kinds of passengers, renowned industrialists and actors, as well as immigrants who were on their way to America in search of a better life. The Titanic was commanded by the experienced 62-year-old Captain Edward John Smith. There was tremendous excitement surrounding this ship among passengers, the public, and the media. Not only was it the world's largest ship at that time, measuring around 269 meters in length and more than 53 meters in height, but the luxury it offered was unprecedented. In those times, it cost $7.5 million to build the ship. The facilities and decorations inside the Titanic could easily surpass those of a five-star hotel, featuring stained glass, ornate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath, a gym, a squash court, 4 restaurants, 2 barbershops, and a library as well. Moreover, the safety features incorporated into the Titanic's construction led many to believe that the ship was unsinkable. It was considered so safe that the White Star Line, the company that built the ship, was so confident in its design that the vice president publicly declared the Titanic unsinkable. But just 2 days after setting out on its maiden voyage, on April 12, 1912, the Titanic began to receive its first ice warnings. The Atlantic Ocean, which the Titanic was crossing to reach America, was replete with ice, including massive icebergs that posed a significant danger to the ship. These warnings are not uncommon. Vessels navigating the oceans frequently communicate via radio and signal to nearby ships about the presence of ice in their vicinity, urging caution in their navigation. After receiving these warnings, the Titanic changed its course twice to avoid danger, but it did not reduce its speed of 21.5 knots, which is equal to 40 kilometers per hour. It continued its journey towards its destination at that speed. 2 days later, on April 14, 1912, there were 7 more ice warnings, but Captain Smith and his crew disregarded these warnings. They did not slow the speed of the Titanic. Slowly, the day draws to a close. The sun sets, and the temperature decreases. Notably, on the night of April 14th, the moon was absent. Without the moon, there was no moonlight, resulting in low visibility that night. The ship featured a crow's nest, a modest elevated platform that functioned as a lookout point. An observer was posted there to monitor the ship's path and watch for any potential hazards or obstructions. The person sitting here has to face very low temperatures. The cold winds were blowing at a very fast pace. Moreover, it was nighttime. The cold winds make the eyes tear up, which makes it difficult to see. At 11:39 p.m., a man named Frederick Fleet was at the crow's nest. Suddenly, he saw before himself a huge iceberg. He rang the bell thrice quickly so that the people below could be alerted, then picked up the phone and called the officers on the bridge. He screams that there was an iceberg in front of them and that the ship should be steered immediately. First Officer William heard this message and signaled the engine room that the ship should be steered in the left direction, but unfortunately, it was too late. Just 1 minute later, at 11:40 p.m., the ship crashed into the iceberg.
The Titanic was a new breed of luxury liner.
Titanic left port in Southampton, England.
Among her passengers were many of the wealthy and influential. The band played the gayest tunes and American ragtime dances. The time was 11:40.
The iceberg grazed the right side of the ship.
And all of a sudden she lifted up quickly. Everything that was movable was going through her.
I didn't think it was serious because I didn't think it was possible. A big ship like that could sink. It sank very quickly.
This iceberg was not a small one. It measured 200 by 400 feet in length, as big as a football field, and was so high that it matched the crow's nest in height. Scientists estimate that the iceberg weighed as much as 1.5 million tons. The Titanic's front right side, specifically near the bow, collided with the iceberg. Now, what is the bow? As you can see in this picture, the part right at the front is the bow. The part above the bow is called the stern, and the protruded part below is called the keel. For around 10 seconds, the ship grazed against the iceberg, and a huge dent was formed. Due to this, small holes formed in the main body of the ship. A few seconds after the collision, the ship's captain, Smith, and the architect, Thomas Andrews, arrived at the site to assess the damage incurred by the impact. When they saw the extent of the damage, they realized that the ship would sink and were completely shocked upon seeing this. They had thought the ship was unsinkable. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that this ship was considered unsinkable, owing to its impressive safety features. There were two main safety features which led to this belief. First, this ship had a double-bottom hull. The main body of the ship is called a hull, and a double-bottomed hull means two layers. Even if the lower layer got damaged, the second layer could save the ship. Second, the hull of the ship was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if 4 out of the 16 compartments were filled with water, the ship would still sail. It would make no difference to the ship. However, the impact created by the iceberg was on the side of the ship, where the double-bottom hull proved to be of no use. Second, the impact was so large that 6 out of the 16 watertight compartments were breached, and water was filling all of them. The limit was 4. The inundation of 6 compartments meant that the ship couldn't be saved from sinking. The unsinkable ship would sink. 20 minutes after the collision, at 12 a.m., Captain Smith ordered his crew to send a distress call over the radio in hopes that nearby ships would detect it and come to their aid. Senior radio operator Jack Phillips turns out to be the hero of our story. One after another, he began sending distress signals. There was no response. He sent another, and then another, believing there must be some ship out there that would pick up their distress call. 20 minutes later, at 12:20 a.m., there was a ship called RMS Carpathia near the Titanic. It detected the distress signal. The captain spoke to the operator of the Titanic over the radio and directed his ship to move towards the Titanic to attempt a rescue. The problem was that despite its relative closeness, this ship was 107 kilometers away. Even if it moved towards the Titanic at its top speed, it would take 3.5 hours to reach. Would the Titanic stay afloat for 3.5 hours? The rest of the crew members lit up flares and rockets in the sky, hoping that a nearby ship would notice them. Unfortunately, apart from the RMS Carpathia, there was no response from any other ship. Meanwhile, Captain Smith ordered the evacuation of passengers using the lifeboats on the ship. As per protocol, women and children were given preference to board the lifeboats. As for the passengers on the ship, they were not that scared. Most believed that the Titanic was an unsinkable ship, and there was no need for worry. After all, the company had claimed this repeatedly in its advertisements. So, yes, they might have hit an iceberg, but the ship wouldn't sink for this reason. Consequently, the first lifeboat that was lowered had a capacity of 65 people, but only 28 boarded. Half the lifeboat remained empty as it was lowered. With the passage of time, compartments began to be filled with water one after the other, and the ship began to tilt gradually. When the passengers realized that the ship could indeed sink, this realization dawned. There was chaos, and people began to run around and panic. By 1 in the night, so much water had filled the compartments in the front that the bow of the ship had gone underwater. Due to this, the stern of the Titanic emerged from the water, and the propellers at the back became visible as the ship tilted to this extent. Chaos ensued. Passengers began to compete fiercely for a seat in the lifeboats. The issue was the lack of sufficient lifeboats on the ship. There were only 20 lifeboats, which could accommodate only about 1,200 people, yet there were around 2,200 people aboard the ship. At 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat was lowered from the Titanic, but 1,500 people were still on board. In this chaos, some people tried to snatch places in the lifeboats, while others had accepted their fate and stayed back on the ship.
At the end, it was chaotic at the end. Everybody was crying, praying, trying to get into the few lifeboats that were left. No, it was pretty sad at the end.
According to eyewitnesses, the ship broke into two halves at around 2:20 a.m. and then slowly began to sink. It did not take even 3 hours for the unsinkable ship to sink. Of the 1,500 people aboard, some either drowned with the ship, or those who knew how to swim succumbed to hypothermia. The temperature of the water was -2 degrees Celsius. If you fall into the water at this temperature, you would likely die within minutes from hypothermia. It is rumored that the captain of the Titanic, Edward Smith, remained at the helm until the end and drowned with the ship. Some also speculate that he took his own life. The ship RMS Carpathia, which had set out to rescue the Titanic, reached the location around 3:30 to 4 a.m. Although it was an hour late to save those who were still aboard the ship, it managed to rescue nearly all who had boarded the lifeboats, approximately 705 survivors. After the disaster of the Titanic, questions were raised and many controversies emerged. Investigations were conducted, and some unknown facts surfaced that shocked everyone. How would it feel if I told you that there was another ship just 37 kilometers away from the Titanic that night, which could have made it in time to save the passengers? It's true. The ship was the SS Californian. 1 hour before the Titanic hit the iceberg, the last iceberg warning was issued by the SS Californian. They had warned, "Watch out, there are a lot of icebergs in the ocean here." After that, at 11:15, the radio operator on the Californian had switched off the radio. The Californian had stopped for the night, not moving ahead, keeping the danger in mind. Since the ship had stopped for the night and the radio was off, it did not receive the distress signal. The ship was so close to the Titanic that the passengers on the deck of the Titanic could see the ship on the horizon. When the officers were boarding passengers into the lifeboats, one officer even remarked that he could see a ship in the distance and that it would come to save them soon, so there was no need to worry. However, the Californian ship did not come, even when rockets and flares were lit up. It is reported that after 12 a.m., the crew members on the Californian had actually seen the rockets fired from the Titanic. They had even informed their captain, Stanley Lord, but the captain insisted that it was not a distress signal, rather the rich men on the Titanic who were partying. Had Captain Lord of the Californian ship taken the rockets and flares seriously that night, so many people aboard the Titanic could have been saved. The next morning, when they switched their radio on, the crew of the Californian received the SOS calls from the Titanic. They reached the site, but it was too late by then. They only saw dead bodies floating in the water. Both inquiries that were conducted in this matter placed blame on Captain Lord of the Californian. However, one single man cannot be blamed for such a huge disaster. Other factors were also responsible. For example, there were not a sufficient number of lifeboats because the company that built the ship thought it was unsinkable and deemed the lifeboats unnecessary. Additionally, the captain of the Titanic had not even conducted safety drills. A safety drill was scheduled to be conducted on the day the Titanic collided with the iceberg. However, the captain canceled the scheduled safety drill because he thought it was unnecessary, believing the ship was unsinkable. The next mistake was made by steersman Robert Hickens, who was at the steering wheel that night. When an iceberg alarm was sounded, the officer on the deck instructed that the ship should be turned left. However, in a panic, Robert Hickens misunderstood the message and steered the ship to the right, directly towards the iceberg. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. The British inquiry also found that the Titanic had received numerous iceberg warnings and had been advised to proceed with caution. But despite that, the ship was sailing at full speed. Why was that? Why did the captain not slow down? There are many theories behind this decision. A popular theory suggests that Joseph Bruce Ismay, the chairman and managing director of White Star Line, the company that built the Titanic, influenced Captain Smith and pressured him to maintain the ship's speed. There was tremendous pressure from the company for the ship to complete its maiden voyage in 6 days so that a record could be set, demonstrating that the Titanic was not only the biggest and most luxurious ship, but the fastest as well. A specific incident happened on April 14th at 2 p.m. when Captain Smith saw an ice warning and showed it to Joseph Bruce Ismay, suggesting that they should reduce the ship's speed. However, Ismay stuffed the paper into his pocket so that neither the passengers nor the crew members would find out. He did not want the ship's speed to slow down. This one disaster changed the maritime industry worldwide forever. Many new regulations and standards were established to avoid such disasters in the future. In 1914, an international ice patrol was set up to alert oncoming ships about icebergs in their path. Additionally, a treaty, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, was signed, which set new standards for ships. For example, a lifeboat regulation was framed, mandating that ships should have a sufficient number of lifeboats for every passenger. When the Titanic sank, it took more than 70 years to find its wreckage under the sea. In September 1985, American ocean explorer Robert Ballard and a French oceanographer managed to locate the Titanic. Its wreckage was found 3,800 meters, approximately 3.8 kilometers, under the sea. 2 separate pieces of the ship were discovered 800 meters apart. So many years after the ship sank, the environment has started to erode the ship lying underwater. The actual ship once looked magnificent, but today, this is all that's left of it. It has been reported that bacteria and other organisms are eating away at its metal framework. It is expected that by 2030, the ship will completely disintegrate underwater. Even after 110 years, the fascination with the Titanic still remains in the minds of people. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more informative videos like this one. Thanks.